now we welcome on one of the biggest breakout stars of 2024, Georgia Bell. Welcome to the CITIUS Mag podcast. European Championship silver medalist. What else we got? World indoor 1500-meter finalist, British champion, headed to the Paris Olympics. I guess getting ready for the London Diamond League as the final tune-up before Paris. How are things going?
Yeah, I think that summarizes it pretty well. Things are going well. 2024 has been a good year so far. I can't complain.
I did an Instagram deep dive just to see just where we were like a year ago. And
Yeah.
like if someone would have read off like that whole list of accolades from this past year, would you have believed that you've accomplished this much? Or what was sort of like the grand plan?
Yeah, n not at all. Like even the beginning of this year looked totally different. Even like 2 months ago, I was working full time. So like things have changed pretty drastically in the past couple of months. And yeah, I'm obviously just enjoying it a lot, loving having a breakout season and yeah, just loving racing.
Yeah, so I want to kind of go over not necessarily like your entire sort of career because it does span back to, running as a kid and having success at a young age. But I feel like that's the big thing that you have been correcting people on. It's sort of with this whole comeback is that it wasn't just like this overnight thing that took place just in a span of a couple months. Like you do have a history within the sport. So I guess where do you want to kind of pick up as like, all right, like this is the Georgia you see now is started being formed at this point. Was it the pandemic, really?
Yeah, I think it was probably the pandemic. So just to give a little bit of background, like started running when I was 11 through sports day, got into the kind of UK club system and was like a pretty promising junior. So was the highest ranked 800-meter athlete for under 15 and under 17 in the UK. Went over to the US on a track scholarship. So went to Cal Berkeley, was part of the NCAA and Pac-12 system. And unfortunately, no disrespect to those programs, but just never got better than I had in the UK. Never realized that potential. And to be honest, my performances just got a little bit worse. To the point where when I graduated, was like, okay, I'm done with running. I'm just gonna go and be a normal person in the world. Like, never thought I would put on spikes again. And then COVID came, and I got back into running. I also took up cycling, which I think is a huge bit of my story. And that's why I still have my handle as Georgia the duathlete when everyone gives me crap about it. But I feel like it is that is like still a huge part of what my training looks like and kind of a bit of a USP for me, I guess. And then yeah, like a couple of years into um past COVID, so 2022, 2023, that's when I got back in touch with my old coach. And I've been working with him now for the past 2 years. And yeah, he got me track fit and is kind of having this breakout season at the moment.
When did you sort of sit down to kind of plan out just like even last year was not all in on track. That for
No.
you, like the plan was it just sort of the allure and the grandeur of like the Olympic year that is like, all right, if we're gonna just go all in on track, that now's the time.
No, it wasn't that at all. I mean, this time last year, if I had thought about going to the Olympics, that would have seemed pretty bonkers. Like, I'd run 4:06, but I was just doing like local meets in the UK. I'd never been to a Diamond League. I'd never been to a gold meet, like nothing like that. So it wasn't about that. I think I had just gained a level of fitness and I could see through the runs that I was going on that made me interested in wanting to get back to that competitive side again. So it really just started with seeing how fast I could go. And when I reached out to Trev, my coach, he kind of said, okay, well, let's aim for British champs. This was last summer, and I was like, no, like I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that again. I just want to see how fast I can go. And then obviously, once things started getting a bit quick, it was really the goal was to try and make world indoors. That was kind of my Olympics originally back in kind of November last year. I decided that's something I really want to aim for. And then the goalposts have just kept changing.
Yeah. Even one of your most recent Instagram posts, like you kind of just have this great contrast where you're just sort of, well, let me see, I pulled it up. It was that January you were running unattached, emailing meet directors on your own. And then now you're in this position where like you're a sponsored athlete with Nike getting ready for like the Paris Olympics. So what was that January sort of part of your career at that point where you were essentially pitching yourself? Like, was the hope even like, I'm going to try and get a sponsorship, or you were content with just like qualifying for World Indoors, even if it wasn't like on a pro contract or anything like that? What was the hope?
Yeah, so I was still, so I've taken a sabbatical over the summer, but I do have a job in tech sales technically. So I was still working full time, and I just didn't really think that there'd be an opportunity for someone like me to really get a contract, like so competitive. Um, but yeah, so I went on training camp with the team. So I'm lucky to be part of a really good team. I've got like Keely Hodgkinson, Sarah Healy, Erin Wallace, some really good names in the team. And I was training with them in November in South Africa. And that was kind of a big jump in itself. I was like, am I really going to go away, take my PTO to spend time with these like pro athletes? And then I got there and I just loved it. And I was kind of in the mix with them. And I was like, you know what? Like, why don't I give Wild Indoors a go? And kind of my coaches were like, it's going to be hard to just get you into races, like, because you don't have an agent, you know, you're not with the brand. But like, we can get their email addresses and we know what you're capable of. And like, we believe in you. And so, yeah, I was just like hustling a little bit. And then I got a cancellation for a meeting in Dortmund in Germany. They messaged me saying someone's just pulled out, we're happy to give you a shot. Like 406 is not what we'd usually let in. But like here you go. And I was just so determined to make the most of that opportunity. So just like Fran ran it and ran a 403, which was the world lead at that point. So my life hack is run really early in the year and you'll get a world lead for about a week, which is what happened with me. But then obviously that was the world qualifying time. And then you know, everything kind of kicked off from there.
Yeah. What were the signs in practice that were telling you that, times like that were on the horizon for you and that you were fully capable of? And like, what were you seeing sort of in practice?
Yeah, so I guess like last summer I ran 406 just kind of on slow tracks around the UK, like no disrespect to them, but they're not, you know, I've just come back from the Paris Diamond League and I know what it means now when people say those big stadium tracks like they're quick. So other athletes were kind of saying to me, they were like, if you ran 406 like on these tracks, just wait till you get into some big meets, like you'll go a lot quicker. And then obviously just in training, the stats, like my coaches are really on the stats and they give a breakdown spreadsheet after every session. They know to a T. And the fact that I was able to hang on to like some of these world class athletes and mix with them, like that's a pretty good sign that like, okay, well, if I can hang with them in training, then surely I'll be able to do well in a race. So the signs were there, the numbers were there, and then it was just about making sure I make the most of the opportunities when I did get a shot.
Because I think you originally like envisioned yourself as this wasn't going to be like a 815 focus, right? Like,
Right.
especially coming from like with the cycling background and everything, that the longer stuff probably made more sense, where 3K, 5K. And now, so far this year, I mean, the sub two, sub four combo is something that is so rare. You've run 159 for 800 and then 356 for 1500. Like, when did that sort of shift in training happen?
Yeah, like that was really scary to me at the beginning. So the duathlon, which is what I did before coming back to the track, the event I would do was the standard distance. So it's a 10K run, a 40K cycle, and a 5K run. So it's like a big endurance challenge, takes about 2 hours. So in theory, when I returned to the track, I was like, I'll just do 5Ks because I never used to do that. Like I'll just always get PBs, it'll be great. Like I'll never go back to the 15. And then slowly after training with Trevor, you know, he got me quicker again at the 15. And then I was like, but I'll never go back to the 8. Like, surely I could never be as good at the 800 as I used to be in my young 20s. And then obviously we just do our training group is very speed focused. And yeah, he just kind of said, you're probably ready to do an 8. And now I am so excited. I'm doing an 800 this weekend at the London Diamond League. And yeah, I just think it's going to be so much fun. So yeah, it seemed really scary at first, but it was just a matter of getting that speed training in, that lactic tolerance, and kind of feeling ready for it.
Did you have to sort of like reactivate a part of your brain when it came to just sort of the racing side of things compared to what you were doing in like the just sort of like the cycling and the and just the regular sort of running before? Because I think of it as like it's just you versus yourself, and then maybe coming off the bike you can see another person or two and you can reel them in. But on the track it's like you're surrounded by such a tight pack of people that
Yeah.
remembering how to race was a whole nother part that you had to kind of get back.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's weird because like obviously on the one hand, like I had a 5 year break between my track races. Like that's quite a lot. But then you've also done so many races in your life that like it weirdly felt like familiar, and like you have the same instincts of like, oh, I feel good, like am I gonna make a move? Like here's a gap. Like the racing side is actually the bit that I find really fun. Like it feels very instinct driven, and I think that just goes back to like doing so many races like when you're young. Before British Champs, I like wrote a few things down in my journal inspired by Anna Hall when I saw her put that up. And one of the things I did is I looked at my Power of 10, which is basically a website we have in the UK, which just lists every single race you've ever done. And I counted all the races I'd done in my life, and it was like nearly 300 races. And
Wow.
it just really helped calm me down and be like, okay, you know what? I actually kind of know what I'm doing. I'm ready for this. So yeah, even though there was a big gap, it is something that I guess I've put in my 10,000 hours or whatever Malcolm Gladwell says it is.
Yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it is really funny to see just sort of like your progression. It goes like 2017, 210, 2024, 159. And then in the
So,
1500, 2017 was 425, last year 406, and then 356 this year. It like
yeah,
processing all of that. Like, have you even had the time yet to, because the season's not even over to
no.
find out what the final number ends up being? But to be take a step back and be like, wow, I mean, like if the season ended now, like this has been just a tremendous success already.
It has, but I wouldn't be ready for it to be done yet. Like I still know that there's more, which is exciting. I think, yeah, it's definitely been like a whirlwind 6 months. Like so much has changed. But I think at the same time, like it feels really nice because when I quit track, like it was regionals in Austin, like I'd run like 4:30 something for my last 1500 meters. And I was just like, I was so ready to be done, like very mentally and physically burnt out. But I also, like, it was quite sad because I knew that I hadn't achieved my potential, and like, I knew that there was still so much more that could have been. So, even though it's like happening very quickly over these past few months, it also feels like I'm kind of righting a wrong, and it just feels really good.
Were there any pluses you took away from the NCAA time? Because I
Yeah.
did go back and it was really funny to look at some of the results because in some of them, yes, you were a little bit further back, but then at the front end of the races, it'd be like Raven Rogers or Nikki Hiltz. And it's like all these athletes that are
Uh,
still around and like crushing it. And it's just so fun to look at it now and be like, oh, like it's still just the same crop of top athletes. But
I know. I had
coincidentally, the 12th place finisher is now also in the mix.
I know. I had actually a really nice chat with Elise Cranny at Prefontaine because she was Stanford and I was Cal. And we were there at the same time. And genuinely, like, I was like, Elise, you will not know who I am because I was not like racing up with you at Cal the way that like I am now. But like I just remember it was so awesome to watch you race and you were killing it. And we had a nice chat. But no, at the NCAA, like, even though the setup didn't work for me. And I think, I am just an athlete that is a low mileage athlete. Even now, I don't do more than 30 miles per week at all with running, and I do about 100 miles on the bike. So, like, that didn't really work for the NCAA setup. Like, they are very high mileage focused and it works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me, but I absolutely loved the whole professional setup of the NCAA. Getting to train with your friends every day in the sunshine, getting to travel for races, getting kit drops like you're a pro. Like, I would still recommend, like if I had a kid in the future and they were good at running, I would still say, if it's the right program, like you should definitely go because it is an amazing opportunity. And yeah, I did love it.
Yeah. With just sort of like your your season so far this year, what has been kind of like the most fun thing that you've taken away from like this resurgence into the track space and like professional running? Like, has there been something where you're just like, oh wow, this is an element of professional running that I don't like didn't get in college, but I love and is different?
Well, I just was so like just the way obviously that you get all your kit drops and stuff now as a Nike athlete and all things like that. And like going to Prefontaine as a Nike athlete was pretty crazy. Like they have like a glam squad floor where they do like your hair and makeup and nails. Like it's just like super fun. But like the whole thing has just been a novelty. Even the first time I was like, wow, so someone just picks you up from the airport when you fly in, like you just have an agent book your flight. Like I'm used to just like, yeah, just driving myself to meets and like, it's a big change. But yeah, I think the Diamond League circuit is really interesting. You do the thing of you have a few days before you race and you actually become like friends with your competitors. Like there is a nice bit of camaraderie in a way because you're like living with these people multiple times a year. Sometimes you're rooming with them. So that's one thing that's been kind of funny to experience.
One thing you just brought up before was just sort of like the cycling portion. And this was one of the questions I think that people submitted on Instagram. It's just sort of like how much cycling are you still doing? And then a side part of it is like, what do some of those workouts look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I cycle 3 times as much as I run a week. For me, every time I run, it's either like a easy 30, 40 minute recovery run or it's a hard session. Like there's no long runs, there's no like long fartlegs, like stuff like that. So for me, the cycling and the purpose of that is to stop getting injured. So at Cal, I got a couple of stress fractures. And so I was always kind of coming back trying to find fitness. Whereas I think one of the big reasons for this breakthrough at the moment is because I've just had years to like build and build and build without having to take any time off, which is obviously how I wanted to stay. And I'm sure most athletes would. So for cycling, like I would long ride on a Sunday instead of a long run. So I know that's what lots of people do in the running world, but I'll go on like a 3, 4 hour cycle with friends outside. And then on the bike, it's just either hour-long sessions on the Watt bike, and Zwift. Do you know what Zwift
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
Yeah, just to check. So I think that is also crazy good for building your fitness, doing Zwift racing. Like I feel ruined after a Zwift race, like more so than in running races. Like your heart rate is going through the roof, like you are dripping sweat, like it's insane the fitness that you can build from it. And then you still have that competitive edge. So yeah, a mixture of like long rides, some easy recovery rides, but also some sessions in the week where like I'm really pushing myself.
We were talking before we started recording just a little bit about how interesting like your setup is in particular because most of the group is in Manchester aside from when you guys do like the big training blocks in South Africa. So how much of this are you doing alone and when do you find the time to link up with the rest of the group?
Yeah, I do a lot of training alone. The main reason for that is obviously because I've only stopped working over the summer. Like the laptop got slammed shut on May 1st. So before it was a lot of me having to fit in training around work. So yeah, I wouldn't have been able to try and ask people to do that on my schedule, like who wants to meet at 7 a.m. for a track workout before work? Like I would have no takers. But yeah, it's a lot of it on my own, but I'm just kind of used to it by now. And where I live in London, there is quite a big running hub, so I can jump in with people to do some runs and stuff. And I actually think it's quite good doing training sessions on your own because you get really in tune on the track with kind of what pacing is, like what 64s feel like. So for example, going into Prefontaine, I had to nail the Olympic qualifying time because if I didn't do it there, it would cause me like a lot of problems. And I just wanted to get it ticked off. So I had practiced what 64 seconds per lap felt like. And I just did it like a metronome. I went straight to the back and just did like just under 4 laps of 64 seconds. So I feel like it can be really good in some ways and it's allowed me to front run. But I think, yeah, the area where it sucks training on your own is the warm up, the warm down at the track, that kind of camaraderie. So most of the time on my own, but then I'll go to Manchester for kind of 1 week a month and then see the guys on camps and races.
Can you paint the picture for me? How do Trevor and I guess and Jenny just kind of orchestrate practice when there's just so many people. Like, how often are you in the workout with like Keely?
Yeah, they so Keely is obviously an 800 athlete more than a 15. It's gonna be interesting to see if she changes with the Michael Johnson thing, if she'll have to do a 15. But I do a lot with like Sarah Healy, who is another sub 4 athlete as well. So yeah, there's usually the two of them on stopwatches. We probably have kind of 10 athletes going at any one time. I will probably do a session with Keely like once every couple of weeks. So we did one last week ahead of the 800 that we've got this weekend. And they're very meticulous. Like they have everything down to the decimal point. Um, and yeah, it's a really good group that we've got to train with, which is cool.
The group just got an Instagram, didn't it? Like, this is just a couple days
Yeah.
ago. What's the
Yeah.
story behind M11 Track Club? Like, how did get it? How did that become the name?
Yeah, so the name comes from the area in Manchester, like the kind of postcode or what you call the zip code. So yeah, it launched yesterday. And while we're just on this topic, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question,
Yeah.
but what does CITIUS mag stand for? Like, I don't know if this is something I should know.
No,
Does
this is
it?
great because you've been like, and a part of the reason behind the scenes for people is like, after your race in Paris, we put up the graphic and you're like, oh, it was cool. I got a Citius Mag post, and
Yeah.
then it was just sort of like, oh, that you've been listening to the podcast, and then okay, so for reference, just sort of what Citius Mag is, Citius is the Latin word for faster. And so
Wow.
when I started this back in 2017, I had this idea. I was like, oh, it's going to be a magazine someday. And it never has been a magazine. There's actually never been a Citius Mag. And so just over time, it's like just caught on at this point where people are just like, oh, Citius Mag, that I can't change it. And maybe someday we'll finally release a magazine. Um, for the high school kids who are out there and like just familiarize themselves, I feel like they come into it being like, oh, it was a magazine at some point and now it's not and
Uh,
it's all online. So I can get away with that crowd, I think, a little bit easier. But no, there's never been a magazine, and Sidious is just Latin for faster. Yeah.
okay, cool. Nice. Now I know. I was thinking, does each individual like letter stand for something? And I was trying to work it
No.
out. I was like, I'll just ask Chris.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So who's controlling the Instagram? Is that you
I
guys?
think I think it must be Jen or Trev, one of them. But I think they're gonna get like a social media intern. It'll be a good gig for someone. They'll get to come to South Africa for our training camps, put together some reels of us, and be in the sunshine. So yeah, I
So
guess if they put up an application, people can apply.
yeah. And then you've got no plans of changing your Instagram.
I actually don't like loads of people. I did a vote the other day on my Instagram, like, should I change it? And it was like overwhelmingly, yes, please change it. And people all the time are like, what's going on with the duathlete thing? And I did consider it for changing it for a bit, but I just feel like it is, yeah, it's basically like my USP. I really think that taking time away from running and just spending years building up this aerobic base through cycling it must be a factor in like this breakthrough that's happening now. It can't just be like I've just kind of started again and I'm following a great training plan in Trev and Jenna's training. Like that's definitely a factor, but I just think I am a runner and a cyclist. Like I'm not even when people say, "Oh, you do some cross training," it's like, no, I don't like go on the elliptical. I don't swim. Like I either run or I bike, and like both are my identity. I think I'm just a lot better at the track, the
You would
track.
never give the triathlon a shot, or what's stopping you from swimming?
I just hate swimming, and my hairdresser made me promise that I would give it up because it's a nightmare for your hair.
Gotcha. A year, less than a year ago, I guess, I saw the post about the World AG Duathlon
Mhm.
Championships in Ibiza. So, like, when would you, if you wanted to make a comeback to that, when would be the next sort of big opportunity for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are opportunities over this summer, which I was originally going to go for, but then when Paris became a reality, I was like, okay, that's not something you can do half-heartedly. Like, you've got to put all your eggs in that basket if you want to make it to the Olympics for track. Like, it's so competitive. So they'll probably next year, when it's not an Olympic year. But at the same time, there is just a big risk in cycling that you come off your bike and you get injured. The kind of speeds that you are cycling at, it's very common for people to, yeah, have injuries, and then it's like you're out for 2 months. And so I'm less risk averse at this point, like I don't want to, or I'm more risk averse. I don't want to put myself in a position where I can't run, but I'll definitely go back to that at some point. It's really fun and it appeals to me more than moving on to the road, say like when I'm done with track, how people move on to kind of marathon and stuff like that. I think that would be the point where I go back to the duathlon and the triathlon.
All right, I want to touch on your biggest race so far this year, the one in Paris, which going into it, it's sort of like not a secret when Faith is in the race that it's going to be
Yeah.
fast.
Hmm.
And even I think in the pre-race press conference, like Laura Muir had said, like, oh yeah, I've been in enough of her world records that I know, like, I'm her good luck charm. So how
Yeah.
did you approach that race, knowing that, okay, let Faith go do her thing? There is going to be a race for me just a little bit further back.
Hmm.
What was the plan going into that one? Because you hadn't broken four there and you just smashed it.
Yeah, I know. I was so happy, but I think I just like because it wasn't that long ago that I was hustling to try and get into meets off my own back. That like when I get presented with an opportunity to race in a Diamond League with Faith Kipyegon and all those other athletes, I'm just like, you know, chomping at the bit. I'm like, this is amazing. So I just went into it thinking, get on the train, like slot in there, get on the train. And I knew that we were going to be pulled around to a fast time. I think I surprised like Jen and Trev by going through 56, and probably a few other people. But I wasn't too surprised because I ran that race in Prefontaine, like a very measured, like I was so aware of what the splits were because I needed to get a job done. And what was really special about Paris, apart from the amazing atmosphere, is that it was actually a race. Like I just slotted in and I was just making moves when I felt good. I didn't know what was going on with the clock. I just was like running to race. And what I'm really finding is that's when the time is kind of like a bonus. And I hope that's what happens this weekend in London too. So yeah, it felt really good. And I actually like got a little bit boxed in that race too. So I crossed the line and was like, ah, I know I could have actually gone quicker. So I'm excited to do another one this season.
I I looked at the sort of finish line photos from this race, and you would think that when people ran this fast, there would just be just bodies all over the ground, but that
Yeah.
wasn't the case.
No, like I don't know what it was. I just felt like I was floating. Like I did a Doha Diamond League earlier this year and we ran a 4:03 and that felt so hard. And I was just like, damn, like how am I ever gonna break 4 minutes? And then I don't know if it's fitness, the stadium, like the whole atmosphere of being in a world record race, but just felt amazing.
Do you
And
have a
everyone,
preference? Oh, go ahead.
I was
What was
gonna say everyone I spoke to felt the same. Like everyone else was like, that felt awesome. I felt so good.
Do you have a preference between like, because I've been looking just through like all of your results from this year, and yeah, there were sort of like the fast, quick attempts,
Hmm.
right from the gun, but then you did have just sort of like this period all throughout June where it was just all championship style racing.
Yeah.
Do you prefer one over the other?
Um, Obviously like championship racing is fun and like getting medals. I think it's cool to run fast times, but like it's cooler to come away with the medal. So June was all about championship racing, like Euros, getting a silver there. That's like my first international medal, so that was huge for me. And then obviously British champs, like I went in with the goal of just booking my Olympic spot and like winning there was like yeah, like a huge thing for me. And while I do like that racing and like don't get me wrong, if it's slow and it comes down to a kick, like I'm a fan. I also think it's really fun to go into a race where it's like a time trial, like the Diamond Leagues. Like it doesn't matter if you finish second or 10th, but if you run like a 5 second PB, it's just like we're all in it together. We know it's gonna be like a fast one. They're both fun. Like I like the mix of both.
You talked a little bit about how like in Eugene it was just sort of like just rattling off
Hmm.
64s, and then in Paris this has just been something interesting I picked up on from speaking to some of the athletes who competed at like the US Olympic trials and how crazy fast some of those races were. But
Mm.
did you ever look at any of the splits in the race, while you were running and realizing how fast you guys were going?
Well, I knew like the first lap is probably the lap you're the most engaged in. So I could see that ahead of me, they went through in like a 61, but then I couldn't really work out what we'd gone through in. And I guess for me, I was like, if we hit the bell, I think we hit like if you want to hit the bell with like 2:55 or something along those lines. But um as long as you see it's kind of like mid to low 250s, then I knew we were going to run fast. But I think my last lap was like a 59. So I think I like did a really quick last lap. So yeah, I not really to be honest. Like it was the total opposite of pre where I was just so focused on the time and nothing else. But yeah, best race ever.
Yeah. I want to hear a little bit more about sort of like the full-time job and like this sabbatical that you've taken.
Yeah.
Like, how did you present that at work? It's like, hey, I'll be back in a couple months. Just got to go run at the Olympics.
Yeah, it was funny. Like it was an odd conversation, and I honestly didn't know what they were going to say because on the one hand, I was like, I really feel like I could make the Olympics. Like I was starting to think that in like January, February, like allow myself to think that. And then I was like, but damn, I'm like working a full-time job. Like, is it really possible? Like I knew it wasn't really possible. And I also think that one of the big reasons I'm having the breakthrough at the moment and the times I'm doing is because I'm not working. Like I'm not having to train at 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. like gonna actually sleep and recover and do all the stuff that you need to do to be a pro. But I was still working properly at Wild Indoors. And obviously I said to work, I was like, look, guys, I'm gonna be out of the office on Friday because I'm competing at World Championships. And they were obviously like, what? Like, okay, well, I guess we'll tune in on BBC. They tuned in and I had to put it on my out of office. I was like, guys, please don't bother me. Like, tune in on BBC. I'll be back on Monday, like whatever your emergency is. And I think on the commentary, they just did me a really big favor because I came fourth. And I think the commentators just said, Georgia, she's still working full time. She must know that if she gives us a shot, that she could make the Olympics if she takes it kind of more seriously. So after that, I kind of went to work and said, look, guys, what do you think about me taking a break? And luckily, they were just super supportive. So I had to finish up the quarter. So it's only been from May that I've been a fully fledged professional athlete. And yeah, it feels nice.
That that return to work on Monday, did people get it? Like, and was it celebrated in the office? Like fourth in the world.
Yeah, yeah, they were. They were like, they I think at first people would get the message and they were like, so I actually get the idea of putting that out of office was so I wouldn't get bugged, but I actually got more and more people being like, sorry, like what's going on? You're an athlete, like let's talk about this, like where can I tune in? And I put the link. I was like, if you want to tune in, like here's the race. And so loads of people did tune into it, but yeah, like it was good to have their support. And yeah, obviously been crucial for helping me get to the Olympics this summer, I think.
And what exactly is it? Because it's like I've read a couple different things. It was like there was AI involved, cybersecurity. What does that
Yeah.
look like when you're actually back? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's tech sales. So I'm selling cybersecurity software to stop companies from getting hacked. And it uses a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which essentially just understands normal behavior. So then it can detect when something weird's going on and interrupt it. So that's it.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
if it works listening, let me know how my pitch is.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, like you're on a sabbatical right now. This is not you quitting your job like literally on this podcast, but like the plan is to go back. When is the return date?
So the plan is to go back. I mean, yeah, the plan is to go back. I'm just gonna see how this summer goes. Obviously, it has really opened up my eyes with what's possible if you commit to it. It's hard because like I've built up a career in this industry, which is cybersecurity is only going one way. It's booming business, and I've done it for 7 years now, so I've got to like a really good spot. I never thought I would be in this position where I'm going back to track like years after quitting. And again, never thought that I would be in like going to an Olympics position. So it's not like I'm kind of just going to amateur meets, like I'm going to the Olympics. So it's a good problem to have, but yeah, there's gonna be a decision, I'm sure, at the end of the summer. But yeah, that was extra motivation for me at British Champs. Like I remember being in the call room and I was like, Georgia, if you don't come top two here, then you could be back in the office on Monday. So like let's pull this one off, okay?
That's funny. On top of that, it was less than a year ago then that like you've also got like these photo shoot campaigns with like wearing other brands and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, now
Yeah.
these modeling gigs, you can't use those photos because like now you're a Nike athlete.
Yeah, so I was part of so my agency that I'm with, they manage athletes from just like the athlete perspective, so getting you into races, but they also have like a fashion aspect and a sport modeling aspect. So I was part of the sport modeling thing for a bit. It's actually funny. I was laughing to the owner the other day because I went to him like after I'd done like a 4:33 mile and I was like, what do you think about me, signing as like a professional athlete? And he was like, no. He was like, you're not, you need to get a little bit quicker. And I was like, okay. And then it's funny, then I came back, I was like, what about now? And he was like, yeah, okay, now we can work with you. So yeah, I'm a Nike girl now.
Yeah. All right. So looking ahead, we've got London Diamond League. What do you want to get out of this race? And like, how's that set you up for success for Paris?
Yeah, so I feel like June was all about championship racing. I'm really happy with how that went. July is all about running as fast as we can to know that like you've got it in you. And then August is all about mixing those two at the Olympics because I'm sure it will be both tactical and fast. So this weekend with doing the 800, like I just really think 800 helps with the 1500. Like it's crazy how often those races are won in the final few meters of a 1500. Like sometimes there is a huge breakaway, but I feel like a lot of the time it can come down to a dip. Like it's literally a dip in a 1500. So this weekend I'm just really excited for the 8. Like I want to better my personal best. It's the first time that I'm racing with my teammate Keely. And Erin is also doing the pacing. And then we also have a whole bunch of other good athletes in there, like Gemma, Riki, Laura Muir. Like, combine that with the Olympic Stadium. I'm a Londoner, so doing it in London. I just think it's going to be another Paris, fingers crossed, where you just feel amazing and hopefully don't want to jinx it, touch wood, but like everything is set up for if I commit to it, then hopefully we can run fast. So yeah, that's the goal for this weekend. See how fast I can go.
That's exciting. And then in addition to that, I guess like one thing that you've kind of brought up a couple times has just been that for you, these goalposts have just constantly moved of just like what will make this a successful, foray back into track, where first it was just World Indoor Championships and it's making Olympics. Like, where are they at now? Like, I guess that's what I'm wondering. Like, where have you kind of set the, I don't know, like what's the goal now?
Yeah, so I think like we're gonna have some talks at the end of the summer. Like obviously for right now, it's like how best can you place at the Olympics and how fast can we run this summer? There's a lot of championships on next year. Like there's European indoors, there's Europeans, I think, and then there's obviously Worlds in Tokyo too. So it's like then I think we're gonna be a bit more um intentional about what those goals will be. And then if I'm also a professional athlete full time next year, then there should be some big gains to be made there. But right now it's all about just honestly just enjoying it and having fun. Like I feel like I'm just living my dream, which I never thought, like I thought had been like completely taken away. I never thought I'd be good enough to do this. And right now it's just like the most fun thing that I could have asked for. So yeah, try my best, have fun, commit to it, and then hopefully these good times and races will continue to come.
Awesome. Well, Georgia, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we got our time zones to align and we got to share your story because I was saying before we started recording, I was like, you're a product of the NCAA system. Maybe it wasn't like the best time, but still you went through it. And, I was hoping that I've seen like the BBC articles and just sort of like the press you've been getting in the UK, that your story will definitely resonate with,
Yeah.
people here in the States who like, they may stop running after college and then think that that's it, but you could take a
Yeah.
break and come back to it. So I
I
appreciate
think
you
that,
sharing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say as well, I think that's hopefully something that people can take away. Like I know you have so many people on the podcast who have these incredible stories, and the natural trajectory seems to be like you're really good, you become a rock star at the NCAA, and then you sign a pro contract and you progress from there. And when I quit after college, I genuinely thought like that's it, I'll never go back to track. And I just wish I probably heard more stories like mine, where it's like, you can take a huge break and just get back into something that you love, and like you can make it to a really high level. And it's been interesting hearing like Kate Grace's story on your podcast, or like even, Faith having a baby and Ellie having a baby and coming back, like all of those things. And yeah, it's just nice to know that there's not one route to make it to the Olympics, I guess.
No, it's been great. Well, we'll see you in Paris, but first, best of luck in this race in London this weekend.
Thank you. Will you be in Paris, Chris?
Yeah, I'll be there starting the 25th. So opening ceremonies, I think, on 26th, and then from there through August 11th, I'm doing that marathon for all on the 10th.
Oh,
So
okay, cool.
my body will be dragged off the course, hopefully by the time that the women's race starts the next morning. So we'll see. We'll see how that
Awesome.
goes.
All right. Well, hopefully I see you in person in Paris then. Otherwise, thank
Definitely.